Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're going to start off with some live satellite imagery here in the afternoon on Thursday. A couple of things to point out here. The low that's curling up here, it's almost off the image, that's going through parts of Ontario. That's the same low that back earlier in the week, I'm talking like over the weekend, is the one that came through the Pacific Northwest. And it's one that was partially responsible for some of the flooding that you've seen here in parts of Montana and in Yellowstone. It's still sitting and spinning here. And on the back side of it, there's actually some colder air that's moving through this part of the country. But out ahead of it, we've got severe thunderstorm watches, tornado watches here, severe thunderstorm watches down here for the convection that's just blowing up here on the frontal boundaries that are to the south. We've also seen storms pop up down in Louisiana. And just for me personally, I'm watching very carefully the storms that are coming out of this area right here in Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. And one of the big reasons for that is where this particular bit of precip could end up going over the next the next 12 hours or so. I'll come back to why I'm watching that in just a few seconds. You can also see the beginnings of the southwest monsoon, and this is something we've been waiting to have come in here given the wildfires, and we're going to talk more about that in just a few moments as well. But just to show you, went over to Storm Prediction Center's website, spc.noaa.gov. You've got all these regions through here with severe thunderstorm watches and our tornado watch box here in parts of Pennsylvania and New York. So the storms that are rolling through the Northeast down here to the Mid-Atlantic and then the parts of the Carolinas, pretty nasty at this point in the day. So please be watching the radar. Now, on the bigger picture side of this, I'm going to start with this map. This one looks just at the last 2 weeks of precipitation compared to normal. And what I really want to focus in on is more of the have-nots than the people that have gotten a lot of the rainfall. So we start to identify a few regions, like this region in through here, this pocket in through there, and down here. And then what we've got going on in the southeast and also parts of the Mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. Now, of course, we have our high plains drought. It's very dry throughout the four corner states into California. But just the direction of the flow over the last 2 weeks has really made it quite wet from Northern California through the Pacific Northwest. Now, why am I honing in on these particular areas? So those are going to be the areas that during the current drought and heat stress we've got going now, we do expect there to be some crop damage from that. And just today, the National Weather Service, or the Climate Prediction Center, issued this graphic. And they're looking here now and into the end of the month of June at this. But you've noticed they've identified a few regions where they're talking about rapid onset of drought conditions. And it's these areas, plus the area outlined in here, where we've got excessive heat. And I get very concerned about seeing drought develop in these regions because of where the crop is at the current stage. I mean, much of the crop that's down here, and then in this part of the Carolinas into Georgia, and then down here in Louisiana and Texas, we are, for the crops in there, we're now into the reproductive stages. And so this is the very wrong time of year to have heat and drought stress in those areas. There's a secondary part to this as well, and that I'll come back to this again, but if we do see drought developing, especially in this area early in the season, if that area goes over dry later in the year, if this area is dry, what ends up happening is the flow could try to open up out of the Gulf at some point in July or in August. And what will happen is it'll try to get pulled into the plains and into the Midwest, but it will be kind of robbed of its moisture going over this area to help it recover first, meaning we could see later drought risk in these areas. I'm kind of drawing some lines through. And the whole story here is just continuing to spell that there are large areas in which there is substantial risk as we go forward. So let's kind of keep going with that narrative. The last 7 days has been very stormy. So you're looking here at 7 days worth of precipitation. We've seen a lot of precipitation, including some very large hail, a big storm complex that went through Wisconsin, turned into derecho earlier this week. And don't forget, last week, the heavy rainfall that did come through this region. But take a look. See that area in through there? That is an area that has missed out on a lot of this precipitation. And that's why I'm very curious about the storms that are trying to pop here now to see if they build into some sort of a squall line that goes through there tonight into tomorrow morning. So I'm watching out for that very carefully. Now, with the recent severe storms we've had, there's been a lot of severe weather. And I just made a map. I put it in my morning report this morning, but I'm going to show it to you all as well. Since the beginning of June, and this does not include today, there's been over 3,500 reports of severe weather. A lot of this in the plains has been hail. We then had the derecho event earlier this week that I'm still waiting to see the total amount of damage here, but there were over 700 reports of severe winds and hail and tornadoes in this area. We've also had storms that have curled around a high and at times come out of this direction. You can't see my black arrow there, but it's been doing that, bringing in severe winds and heavy rainfall into parts of the southeast. That's been the setup of this pattern. And since we're talking about the setup of that pattern, let's get into the bigger picture things. And I think it's going to start with the discussion again about La Niña. Now, what I'm most interested in is I'm most interested in seeing how strong these trade winds are to maintain the cooler water here. The fact that we've maintained cooler water here and right outside of the Pacific Northwest, and really the station of kind of above normal waters that are here. Now, why I'm not paying too much attention to the Atlantic is that I still feel as though the pattern is being established in the Pacific. I haven't yet seen any major blocking features, big permanent blocking features in the Atlantic to have me worried about what this particular ocean is doing. So I look at this, I see the cooling here, and I see the cool water there and the La Niña, plus the placement of the warm water, which a year ago had already overtaken the Gulf of Alaska. And it just tells me that the possible teleconnections could favor more ridging in the jet stream here, troughing in the west coast or just off the west coast, which leads to more frequent ridges in the midsection of the United States. And that's what gives us that prolonged kind of concern about the development of drought. Now, just thinking about that, I want to remind you that when you look at June and July, when there is a La Niña, we definitely still have a La Niña. Okay, let's see here. The Southern Oscillation Index is at -15. I'll show you the trade winds in just a few moments. You saw the ocean temperatures. Well, what that tends to do is it just tends to favor, it's not every day, it's not permanent, but it just tends to favor more troughs of low pressure here. So there's ridges, 1, 2, 3 that typically set up. And what that does is that increases the risk of drought expansion in the midsection of the country and throughout the plains. Now, we've already seen the jet break down that way. I mean, this is what it looks like right now. Look at these large loops, the very high amplitude flow, trough off the west coast, big ridge in the midsection of the country. And here's that high pressure cell down south that's got these storms coming out of the east down here. So you look at that and you start to see that the teleconnection with La Niña, what's going on with the MJO and so on, is really manifesting itself in the behavior of the Pacific jet. All right. Now, in terms of this La Niña, I've told you how terrible of a job I've done with forecasting its strength. And one of the reasons for that is I tend to just rely on models for that. That's a pretty normal way to forecast La Niña. And the models, if you go back to February, said, well, let it moderate. This is what it actually did. See, the dashed line there is what the La Niña strength did, despite nearly every model except NOAA's models, which we made a point about saying a while ago. Every other model except NOAA's models called for La Niña to fade. And it's still very much present, and it's having an impact on this pattern. So given the fact that we see more of this when La Niñas dominate in summer, knowing that we've already got drought across a broad area here, despite seeing some change in the drought. In fact, let's go look at that drought monitor change over the last couple of months. So it's improved in places. The worry is, how could it come back or redevelop in certain areas? Because right here, I live in that little county right there. Well, it's not a little county, but Champaign County. It's a big county here in East Central Illinois. We've seen drier conditions come in. And just today, we got the newest update from Climate Prediction Center, released today on June 16th, that suggests that during this time period through summer, there could be rapid onset of drought in this region. Also, take note of the area here in Iowa. That's a spot that's missed some of the recent rains. Yes, central Iowa got beautiful rains earlier this week, but this area, drier. See this part of Texas. Look at the plains, and then notice how active they're painting the southwestern monsoon. Those are all indicators on where this is going. So let's talk about where it is going. I'm going to start you first with the jet stream. If there's going to be a pattern shift, if something's going to break down, I think that the story will be first told in the Gulf of Alaska between Hawaii, Alaska, and Washington. Watch that triangle right there. Now, what we see is in the forecast that more often than not through this weekend, I mean, look at the size of the ridge. We'll talk about the temperatures in North Dakota this weekend. But we continue to see more ridging that dives into troughs in the Northwest. That's this weekend. We go out there to next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. This is all that to next Friday, the 25th on Saturday, and so on. And as we even go out here beyond day 10, what I don't see is split flow here. If split flow begins to emerge, where the jet stream crashes up into a big ridge here and falls apart into a low there, the split taking place here, then what that tends to do is it tends to take the jet stream pattern and bring it farther to the south and change its trajectory from being like this to being more like that. And that changes everything. That would break the entire pattern down. As it stands, you can see these three pieces looking something like that. And as a consequence of that, we end up getting this trough ridge pattern. So as we just play it forward, you're going to see more often than not this ridge of high pressure just bouncing around between here and here over the 15-day time period. All the troughs come into the west, run over the ridge. We'll talk about what those ridge riding storms do. See, here's the next one, running over the ridge, just allowing this whole area to continue to see ridges of high pressure, limited precipitation, and unfortunately the risk of drought development. So that took us out 10 days. This is what the next 15 days from the latest European ensemble suggests. I do need to make an adjustment to this. When the ridge is planted here, all right, and we see such strong southwest monsoon flow, we'll have lows that come in, run through the Canadian prairie, but they will drag weak fronts over the top of this, which will interact with the flow coming around the high like that. Meaning, if I could just draw it for you, I think this whole area that I'm kind of very terribly coloring in will see ridge riding storms. It does not mean that everywhere under there will get rain. It just means that we will see ridge riding storms here while the storm track favors north of it, weak fronts drape across there, and the upper level ridge sits right in this area. South of that, through the mid-south, I think there's real risk of seeing some places that could go the next 10 to 15 days without precipitation. But as I've stated so many times, there will be, that's the thunderstorm symbol, right? There will be isolated convection in this pattern throughout that entire time period. But I think we need to watch this area here for a good chance of seeing ridge riding storms. And that could probably go into New England as well. So watch out for that. That's an adjustment I'd make to this forecast. On the temperature side of it, take a look. Here is the next 5 days. As we play it forward, this is all the way out to day 5 through 10, so that gets us out to the 26th of June. And then as we just keep going, you notice where the model's planting the ridge and keeping it. Now, at this point, I think the European model's got a handle on this better than the GFS, but I'm not going to ignore the GFS. In fact, one of my favorite things to do with the GFS is to go to this site here. Let me take you back to the beginning of it. It's CIPS, and this is run out of St. Louis University. Great website. We're going to go to their extended analogs, and what we're going to have a look at here is the next week, the next 10 days, and then all the way out there into week 2. And what I'm going to do is, I know it's a bit confusing on this site, but I'm going to slide over here and show you why I think there's going to be ridge riding storms. Now what you see here, I know it's kind of small. Let's see if I can blow that up a little bit. What we see here, there we go, is that the chances of seeing thunderstorm activity are not zero. There's 60 to 70% chance running up around that ridge. And we even see it here going out to, day 10. Better chances of storms running the ridge. Day, 12 through 14. See that out there? So don't count out, don't look at this map I showed you a few moments ago and think bone dry in this whole area. I think we're going to still see storms there. But when I look overall and see blues in through here, which remember this goes from today all the way through the 1st of July, there are still strong trades. That means the La Niña pattern is still in control. It's likely going to keep the MJO somewhere close to phase 1 or in null space, and if it pops back out, it'll probably do so in phase 7, 8, 1. Probably not coming around here to phase 3, 4, and 5. What's that mean? That means the pattern I just showed you where the ridges are going to be, that this reinforces those ridges. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And the net effect of all of this, if we wrap up that La Niña pattern, is to just remove the momentum from the atmosphere. And it's come down off of its peak in mid-May, and we're sitting down here right now with a loss of momentum right here in the North Pacific. So we stitch all that together, and about 20 minutes ago, I just got the brand new European weeklies. And this is what they're calling for from June 16 to July 16. What I'm always looking for is a break. So if I keep moving this forward, does it shift away? So if we go out there, to July 25th, or let's just go all the way through the month of July. That's the whole month of July's outlook. What we see is risk of drier conditions here, although there will be ridge riding storms that come around. Possibility, though, of a lot of thunderstorm activity along the East Coast. You say, why here? Well, when the storms are born here, they often spread toward the east and south. And then don't forget, if you place high pressure in this area, the flow comes around like this. If there's another high over Bermuda, which is here, it comes around like that. You just get a lot of surface convergence there, better chances for storms. But that's what we're seeing, I think, in this overall pattern. I don't imagine you to be surprised when I show you that the temperatures are going to reflect the position of that ridge. So the model has now, this is about the 6th time in a row that the weeklies have continued to call for extended risk of having drier conditions throughout the midsection of North America. So that's our new long-range forecast. We're going to supplement that with the brand new update came out early this morning from the CPC. This is the Climate Prediction Center's outlook. Let's blow that up a little bit. There we go. Looking at what the month of July looks like in terms of temperature anomalies and precipitation. Can you see now how they've given equal chances to those ridge runners coming over the top with wetter than average here and an active monsoon? They're trying to anchor somewhere in the mid-south to the plains the greatest risk for driest conditions, which tells me that high pressure will be in this area quite a bit. In addition to that, we've got new 3-month outlooks, and we can look at these a couple of different ways. This is the July, August, September outlook from CPC, just updated today. And again, they're trying to shove this west with time. That's a big unknown at this point. That's consistent with what we see in terms of where the heat might go, but I'm not yet sold on it actually moving in that direction just yet. I got to see where and if, let me make that important here, where and if the drought establishes in this point. I want to show you one other thing. Let's go up to this site. We're actually going to see their model output. I'll show you temperatures first. This is where they've got the July, August, September temperature anomalies. So we're looking at differences from normal here. And the farther west they anchor, this means that with time that ridge could move in this direction and really get established over the Central Rockies. But if it does, that would give you this precipitation outlook for July, August, September. Notice how similar it was to the European model, which we looked at earlier in this month. Right, I guess I'd just say the biggest change was last month's update had the greatest drought risk from western Iowa into eastern Nebraska. It's now basically moved down into Kansas and Missouri. That's where the Climate Prediction Center and NOAA are currently looking at their greatest risk. So that's it. That's your new model data to kind of have a look at here. We kind of explained how meteorologically this is consistent. So we've got to be watching here in the near term, and then what it could do in the longer term farther to the north and west of the Mid-South. Today, we still have a large area under heat advisories, heat warnings, and then this is the tornado warning and the severe thunderstorm watch boxes that are here. Or excuse me, tornado watches, forgive me. And then down here we have our severe thunderstorm watches. This area has been expanding, though, in terms of heat watch going forward. We've had very windy conditions coming out of Montana, and there's red flag warnings back here in parts of Nevada and Utah. Now, if we just take a look at what the high-res models are suggesting, this is the 12Z NAM. Remember, let's get it to this afternoon, this evening. So the front has already cleared. There's where the storms are going through. We were actively watching. Not going to tell you why I'm keeping an eye on right this area. You see that tonight into the overnight hours, there's the potential, I'll rock back and forth, the overnight hours of a storm complex delivering rainfall and unfortunately the potential for some severe weather right into an area that I showed you a few moments ago at the beginning of this video desperately needs this rain. But after we see that going through, we'll have to just keep an eye out on where the outflow of those storms eventually go. And then beyond that, see the southwestern monsoon getting going here? That's a really robust signal there. Finally, on Friday, we'll keep an eye on the coast for some stronger storms here, but this is the way the high-resolution models are playing out into the early part of the weekend. So that's that. Now, I do want to mention, again, this comes from my friend Ryan Maui, and what he does here is he looks at the skill scores of the models. The GFS has really been, in my opinion, underperforming as of late. Very inconsistent. That's the red line versus the European. But we always look at them together, might as well. So I've got the newest GFS over here on the left and the newest European on the right. And as we just play this forward, we kind of see that same pattern playing out we've been discussing. More troughs of low pressure going into the west coast. And as things kind of evolve, it's going to be the weak frontal boundary stretching through here that give us those ridge riding storms. They're just terribly resolved in the high resolution models, in the lower resolution models, which give us the longer outlook, but don't give us the clarity in the thunderstorm development. They're not designed to, and that's okay. So if I could, can I summarize these just to make it to a point? The next 7 days, looking at precipitation differences from normal. We need to just watch for storms to kind of run that edge while the big storm systems run through the Canadian prairie, okay? There will be places that miss out on the rain. By week 2, again, you see the drier conditions in through here, but I'll just make the point. Storm systems roll through here. Weak fronts are draped. The ridge runners come over the top. So I'm just going to watch this area for more thunderstorm activity in this particular pattern. All right, that's very consistent climatologically. Let's move on to temperatures and we'll wrap this one up. Here's today's highs. We've already experienced these. Look at how cool it's going to be on the West Coast tomorrow. Possibly not even getting into the 80s in the Central Valley of California. Whereas that heat wave is rolling through the northern plains by Saturday and Sunday. Might get triple-digit heat in the Red River Valley of the North. We're cooler on the corners. And then as time goes on, this is next Monday to Tuesday and Wednesday. That's your next heat wave coming through. And we've already seen the out to 15 days, but I just want to reiterate what's going on here by showing you this map from the Climate Prediction Center suggesting that that week of the 24th through the 30th, you can see where they've got slight, moderate, and high risk of really above average temperatures. So I'll come back to the point I made earlier. I'm worried about flash drought development in this area. And there's a lot of reasons why flash drought in that area could really not only impact everything we grow here, but to the north of it later in the season. Let's watch it carefully. One last thing to point out, just want to take you back to Europe and give you an update on the temperatures there. Very hot in France today. The heat wave moves east with time, so you can see it spreading across Central Europe, going over toward like Romania and here into Ukraine. And that's going to bring in some drier weather and some hotter weather as that heat wave moves to the east. We bring in some cooler weather into France. So this is why I'm not so focused on the Atlantic. You see how that pattern was open? It's moving systems forward. I think there's more of an emphasis on what's happening in the Pacific as being the major controller on U.S. weather and Canadian weather than anything else. So I'm going to keep watching it. I'll post back my latest updates next week. Until then, have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.